Today we continue our sermon series on full. Now, last week you had little pieces of paper that we put up here, and we wanted to be empty before we could be filled. And today you were given an index card as you came out, and hint, hint, you're going to need that a little later, so keep that handy. That and something to write with. But today, our first thing, talking about full of life, and I may have jumped ahead a little bit in our sermon series just because it was graduation Sunday, and I thought this is a good one for graduation Sunday when we're talking about this. But full of life, first of all, I gotta say, this place is full of life today. Full of life because we're full of expectation, full of expectation of what God is going to do in the lives of these young people, of accomplishments that are attained. We are full of life because you clapped during the choir singing. Wow, is this my congregation? Are you the same people that are here every Sunday? Gary, I think you need to do that each week. That's good. We get Gavin in here on these drums and we're good. You sounded great today. Thank you. Full of life. It is the season of Easter. Jesus died so that we can be full of life. And we're going to talk about what it means to be full of life. But you know, sometimes we go looking for life in places that we don't find life. You know, sometimes the things that drain us of life are looking at even other people's lives. We have this tendency to compare, and it's like, oh, they look so happy, I wish. And you know, the people that we probably most kind of uplift, at least sometime in our lifetime, if we don't do it now, we've done it in the past, the rich and the famous, we look at them, we think, oh, if I had that, I would just be set for life. I wouldn't have a care in the world. And to go kind of a snapshot back in time, the one person that I can remember that I was so mesmerized with was this person. Who is that? Princess Di. You know, everybody pretty much knows Princess Diana, and this might be a history course for some of our younger people out there. Make me feel old, that's okay. But you know, when Princess Diana became Princess Diana, she wed Prince Charles, and I was just getting ready. It was July 1981. I was entering my senior year of high school, and there was this picture book wedding. Now, for some of you that are younger, just kind of a snapshot picture here between this picture and the next picture, we have very similar looking ride going on here. It is her son, Prince William, who got married in 2011 to Kate, Princess Kate. And so just kind of the same look, the same regality, and the same enamored with royalty kind of thing. But getting back to Princess Diana, she was so beautiful. The dress was just, you know, that was the talk of, and probably still is. There was, I don't know if I've ever seen a dress with a train that long, maybe not the train, but the veil, it just went on forever and ever. Princess Di. But as her role unfolded, she became known as the People's Princess. The People's Princess. She lacked arrogance. She was approachable. She connected effortlessly with her social inferiors. One quoted her as, "She had the gift of making other people feel very good," said one of her friends. She was a princess, but she could step down and make you feel special. She was one that interacted with, and it was like she was a missionary almost. She went and she touched the lives of others. Some of the traits that were descriptive of her, both her public and private life, was warmth, sweetness, affection, femininity, naturalness, grace, sensitivity, reserve, humility, wit, instinctive sympathy, thoughtfulness, generosity, kindness, courtesy, and the list goes on and on. You know, talking about the rich and famous, Princess Di actually said one time, she said, "They say it's better to be poor and happy than rich and miserable. But how about a compromise, like moderately rich and just moody?" Unfortunately, Princess Diana And here she is with Mother Teresa, one of the missionaries that we know who worked with the poorest of the poor. But unfortunately, Princess Diana, perhaps that was more of a request on her part to have that compromise. Because Diana, as things unfolded in her life, we got glimpses of her that weren't as beautiful as that wedding day and that picture of her. Diana had some darker traits, and as her life tragically ended early, it's going to be 20 years ago this summer now that she passed away, this high-speed chase by paparazzi. But there were glimpses that we got of the darker side of her. And Sally Bedell Smith has written a book, Diana in Search of Herself, the subtitle, Portrait of a Troubled Princess. She did have the mood swings, and those were drastic sometimes. And she had not only this ability to connect with those in the general public, but every time she got then to her private time, she reflected on that time to the point that she would say, how could I have done this better, to a point that she would demean that what she had done. She saw perceived inadequacies in herself that she just couldn't grasp and couldn't pull herself up over. They talk about, in this book, this kind of borderline personality, an unstable self-image, fear of rejection and abandonment, persistent feelings of loneliness, boredom, emptiness, depression, impulsive behaviors. Even to her friends, the real depth of the need in her life was not known. Said mostly it was Diana's dazzling public persona that lulled even her friends and family into disbelieving that anything could be seriously wrong with her. Sometimes a common fate for those that are borderline in their needs. This was not the Diana that we saw, and that perhaps we even maybe choose to remember. But even with the wedding of Prince William just recently, and probably because this 20th anniversary coming up, perhaps Prince William has been even more open with the struggles he had following his mother's death, the depression, even near suicide that he struggled with. And he and his brother have come out and kind of to raise the public awareness of mental health awareness. With Diana, she perhaps did not seek the assistance that she needed because she had an ambivalence toward it. There was an ingrained mistrust of psychiatry by the British upper class. There was a hostility of the press that was always pressing in to get that glimpse of who she was and what that would be perceived by the press. We have come a long way in 20 years as these two princes step forward and say there is a need for an awareness. You know, as we look to be full of life, so often we look and we judge at the surface, only the surface. Someone recently said, with social media, we get things posted here and there all the time, but it's only the highlights of our lives that get posted. You never post when you're depressed. You never post when things aren't going your way. You never post and it only gives then this facade. That is not the fullness of life that God has come to offer us. The fullness of life that He gives us is it takes a board like this to be able to put up and say, I have junk in my life. I have brokenness in my life, and I need to empty that. I need to give that to God, and I need to find healing for that before I can move on in my life and have the fullness of life that God offers. And you know who offers you that healing is the same person that fills you with life. You don't have to clean up your life before you come to Jesus. You just say, here I am, and all my brokenness. Put me back together, God. Fill me. Please empty me of all the stuff, all the sin, all the stuff I've done wrong, all the stuff that's been done wrong to me, all the stuff that I struggle with in my insecurities, and be that hedge around me. Be that fence that the sheep can go in, and you're the one that protects me, and you're the one that gives me the security, and you're the one that's going to make me whole. That's who Jesus Christ is. Jesus, he always knew he was going to die on that cross, and he walked confidently towards that cross because he knew his brokenness would bring us wholeness. He knew his death would bring us life. You know, sometimes we can be like a wild animal in that corralled fence. You know, we want out, especially as young people. You know, don't put those boundaries on me. I want to live life as free as and be all that I can be. And we come to discover that with those boundaries come the freedom that we seek. With those boundaries come the fullness of life that God has to offer us. That is what Jesus provides. The shepherd. The passage says we hear and we know his voice. He is that gate. We come and go. He leads us in and out. He offers us protection. He offers us guidance. He offers us a safe place. He offers security. He is the only one. And he offers us spiritual nourishment, and the list could go on and on. He makes us full. I want you to take that piece of paper out, if you didn't take it out yet, your index card. First thing I want you to do, you can't see my card. My card's full. I did my card ahead of time. And you're not going to do all this today. This is what I chose to do. I started around the outside edges to write, my life is full in this way. What is your life full of? What are the blessings that you see in your life here and now? God has blessed me with. It can be something that you can see. It can be things that are intangible. But God has blessed me with. My life is full of. And you write it down. Begin that. Take a moment. As you do that, and as you continue to do that, I want to share with you a story. In the Bible, there are those whose names are changed. Sarai became Sarah, Abram, Abraham. I'm going to share a little story about Jacob becoming Israel. Saul became Paul. Peter, the rock. Simon, who became Peter, the rock. That name change was a transformation. It is people walking into the abundant life that God promises. I want to share with you a more modern story that John Schmidt tells of a young boy who lives in Zimbabwe. This little boy's name, young man's name, is, I don't know if I'm pronouncing it properly, but I'm going to say Musamdiwa. Musamdiwa. Musamdiwa, his name means unwanted child. Unwanted child. You know, some children come in this world perhaps unwanted, but to actually for a mother to name their child this. Musamdiwa. He says, my life was never very good. Even my name, Musamdiwa, means unwanted child. When I was 2 weeks old, my mother dumped me in a stack of old tires. The police picked me up and took me to my grandmother, and when she gave me back to my mother, she dumped me again. This time wrapping me in rags and leaving me in a beer hall. No one ever really wanted me except my grandmother, and she was too poor to even buy enough food or pay for my school fees. After I ended up on the streets, some people at church told me about a ministry called Love More House. Love More. And they asked me to come here, and he did. And now he has aspirations to finish school, become a soccer player, maybe later to get a job in a bank. He said, inside my head, I asked God to help me reach my goals and to help me be in school and to be good in soccer, and especially to help me forgive others and not to join in conflict. Someday, I think that God will give me another name, and he has chosen that name to be Amen, which means someone good. He's asking God to give him a new name, Amen, someone good, to go from unwanted child, Musamdiwa, to Amen, someone good. God transforms our lives. He brings us into a new place. He promises to give us a fullness of life. That is who God is, and he has the power to change our name. It might not be a change in our literal name, but it's a change of what defines us, our purpose in life, our call in life. Getting back to Jacob, kind of a biblical example of that. You know, Jacob, do you remember him? He stole his brother's birthright. When Esau came in all hungry, he made the stew, and he's like, well, if you give me your birthright, I'll give you some stew. I know you're hungry. And then he stole his brother's blessing when his father was dying. Right at his father's deathbed, he pretends to be his brother and get that firstborn blessing from his father. You know, the name Jacob can mean trickster. He was a trickster. He was going around tricking people who he was. He wanted to be first. He was always, remember when he was born, they were twins, but Esau was born first, and when he came out, they tied the ribbon on saying, Esau was born first, but they were even fighting in the womb who was coming out first. Jacob always wanted to get ahead, and he didn't always do it the right way. God had his plan, but Jacob was always getting ahead of God's plan. And there is, in his adult life, this time he is actually wrestling with God or an angel, depending on how the scripture is interpreted, but it is some spiritual being. He is wrestling again. He wrestles and he wrestles. And this time is good because he's wrestling with God, and he's not going to let go of God until he gets an answer. At the end of that wrestling, he says, the spiritual being, the angel, God says, what is your name? He says, Jacob. It is at that point God changes his name to Israel. Israel, because you have fought with God and won. You have persevered and have not left go of God. Your name is now Israel. Israel. He surrenders. He almost is like, as he says, uncle, he finally gives up his name, who he is, confesses his sin before God. And at that moment, his name is changed. Israel. Because God perseveres for us. Israel, because we can put our brokenness, surrender everything to God. We just say, here it is. And God comes in and changes our name. He fills our life. Okay, this card that you have, next step. What do you want God to change your name to? What have you surrendered to God? Even all the blessing that you've started to put on there. What do you still have hopes and dreams about that you're clinging to God for, maybe even wrestling for God for. And I was thinking about some circumstances I know in our congregation, and you might have put the same thing on this board and rename it on this card. You might be struggling with something there, but you can put the hope and the dream. I give you my brokenness and my sadness. And one time I told you, in the midst of my brokenness and sadness, I put as my password joyful. Probably needed 6 letters. I wanted joy in my life. I wanted to be known to have joy in my life. And I don't know that I'm there 100%, but God has placed joy in my heart, and I will continue to hold on to that as His hope and His promise. So you can give one thing up and say, God, this is what I want. Even an unsaved loved one that you're standing in the gap praying for, you may have put their name on there, and on here you might say, I want my name to be faithful. I want my name to be, I trust you, God. I want my name to be, and that's that step of faith that whatever you gave there, God's going to fulfill. Because God is faithful. God does love you. God will keep you, and He will keep those who are near and dear to your heart. I have to tell you, at the clear middle on my card, though, I chose to put Jesus. Until we're full of Jesus, it's never going to happen, is it? We grow. These are all steps in growing. And Jesus being our all in all. Jesus being, I love the words in 1 Timothy 6:19 that says that we can find the life that is truly life. If you're going to find the life that is truly life, you're going to find it in Jesus. You're going to find it in Jesus. Continue to write on this card. Hopefully you have at least one thing you've put in the middle. If you didn't yet, keep reflecting on that. And as the week goes on, keep filling that up with the blessings of God and how your life is full. How your life is full. Let us pray.